August 20th, 2024. The global gaming industry just hit a massive, invisible brick wall. It started at 10 in the morning, Beijing time. Steam's download servers began to scream. The bandwidth peaked at nearly 80 terabits per second. That is enough data to crash a small country's entire internet infrastructure. For context, 82% of that traffic was coming from a single region, Asia. 2.4 million people were playing one single game at the exact same time. This wasn't a new Call of Duty. It wasn't a sequel from Sony or a mascot from Nintendo. It was a story about a monkey from a studio you've never heard of. In just 72 hours, 10 million copies vanished from the digital shelves. Within a month, the revenue crossed $1 billion. These are numbers that usually belong exclusively to a Rockstar Games release. Western executives were suddenly scrambling to understand what happened. This is what we call a bandwidth shock. It happens when a market that was previously ignored suddenly wakes up and takes over. For decades, the global industry treated Chinese games like a low-fidelity joke. They saw China as a factory for cheap mobile clones and gambling apps, but they were blinded by an old and very dangerous stereotype. Because to understand why this monkey broke the internet, you have to understand the 14 years of silence that came before it. In the year 2000, the global gaming industry was on fire. Sony launched the PlayStation 2 and changed entertainment forever. But in China, the doors were slamming shut. The government issued a total ban on foreign video game consoles. They feared that gaming would destroy the minds of the nation's youth. A famous headline in the Guangming Daily branded it electronic heroin. This created a massive cultural and technical vacuum. For 14 long years, not a single legal console was sold in the country. This is the mechanism of the institutional freeze. The ban didn't actually stop people from playing. It just changed the location. It forced a generation into noisy, smoke-filled internet cafes called wangbas. Because consoles were illegal, domestic developers stopped building for them. They pivoted entirely toward low-budget PC MMOs and mobile apps. These games weren't designed for art or deep stories. They were designed for monetization-first extraction. While Western studios were perfecting the AAA pipeline, China was stuck. They became the world's factory for mobile gacha and psychological manipulation. By the time the ban was finally lifted in 2014, the gap was massive. China had the capital and the players, but it had lost its creative soul. A generation of talented engineers was trapped in a corporate grind, and a few of them were finally starting to snap. Feng Ji was a rising star inside Tencent's massive machine. He was the lead developer on a project called Asura. It was a high-budget MMO based on the Sun Wukong legend, but the corporate gears began to grind the project down. Management prioritized immediate profit over creative depth. They saw players as livestock to be milked for microtransactions. Disillusioned, Feng Ji fought back with his pen. In 2007, he published a manifesto called Who Murdered Our Games? He argued that capital-driven practices were stripping the industry of its soul. In June 2014, 7 veteran developers finally walked out. They left the world's biggest gaming company to start a revolution. They founded a tiny studio in Shenzhen called Game Science. They started with just 21,000 RMB in the bank. That is roughly $3,000. To stay alive, they spent years making high-quality mobile titles, but at home, they were playing premium masterpieces on Steam. They realized they were trapped in the AAA vacuum. In February 2018, Feng Ji proposed a total pivot to premium development. This was the quality over capital pivot. They relocated to Hangzhou to lower their burn rate and focus. They were about to use a 13-minute video as bait to hire an army, and they were about to pull off the greatest technical heist in gaming history. How did a tiny team in Hangzhou beat the Western giants at their own game? The answer is a technical gear called the industrialized pipeline. For decades, the AAA standard was built on brute force labor. If a studio like Ubisoft wanted a realistic castle, they hired 500 artists. These artists spent months manually drawing every brick and every texture. They had to constantly simplify those models so the hardware wouldn't crash. This process is called retopology, and it is the most expensive bottleneck in development. Game Science didn't have 500 artists, so they decided to go on a literal 3D heist. They were early adopters of Unreal Engine 5. This software has a secret weapon called Nanite. Nanite allows a developer to import massive, high-poly files directly into the game. This feature effectively deleted the retopology bottleneck. It meant the team could scan the real world and drop it into the world of Wukong with zero loss in quality. The team spent years traveling across China, targeting 36 ancient historical sites. They focused heavily on the Shaanxi province, home to the oldest wooden structures on Earth. They used non-contact 3D scanning to digitize temples from the Ming dynasty. They captured the Blue Cloud Temple down to the microscopic cracks in the statues. Then they added Lumen, a system that calculates light in real time. This allowed a small team to create cinematic moods that usually require a 100-person crew. Finally, they hired Yin Kai, a martial artist, to perform every staff-wielding move. By combining scanned reality with captured movement, they masked their small budget. 140 people outproduced a Western army of 1,000. They weren't just building a level, they were building a factory. August 2024 wasn't just a product launch, it was a head-on collision. As the game climbed the charts, Western media began publishing reports on the studio's culture. They dug up vulgar social media posts from the founders dating back over a decade. But then, the story took a turn into the world of high-stakes corporate consulting. Rumors began to circulate about a firm called Sweet Baby Inc. The narrative was that these Western diversity consultants had approached Game Science to modernize their story for a $7 million fee. Whether the dollar amount was true or not, the reaction from the studio was unmistakable. They refused to play the game. When the review keys were sent out, they came with a controversial set of guidelines. Streamers were told to avoid feminist propaganda, politics, or trigger words like COVID-19. To the Western press, this was a declaration of war on transparency, but to a massive global audience, this was cultural sovereignty. They saw a studio that refused to let consultants sanitize ancient mythology. This was the mechanism of ideological defiance. Instead of apologizing, Game Science leaned into the friction. Every negative article seemed to drive 1,000 more sales from players who were tired of consultant-led design. The game wasn't trying to be diverse by Western standards, it was trying to be authentic by its own. This proved that the center of gravity in the gaming world had officially shifted. For years, the boardrooms of Tencent and NetEase were locked in a mobile-first mindset. They viewed AAA games as a massive, unnecessary financial risk. But Black Myth, Wukong didn't just break records, it broke their entire investment logic. This is the recalibration of ROI. The Big Two realized that a single premium title could generate $1 billion in 30 days. But more importantly, it generated something mobile games never could: global brand equity. It turned a studio into a national icon and a global powerhouse overnight. Tencent, which originally held a 5% stake, didn't wait around. By early 2026, they aggressively increased their ownership in Game Science to 24%. It was a defensive move to ensure they weren't left behind by the very revolution they helped spark. The economic shockwaves even hit the hardware market. In a region that historically ignored consoles, PlayStation 5 sales doubled in a single week. Even with US trade restrictions, demand for Nvidia's flagship RTX 4090 GPUs skyrocketed. Players were literally upgrading their lives just to see their history in 4K. This proved that quality wasn't just an artistic choice, it was a massive economic engine. As we look toward the end of 2026, the story of the monkey is just the beginning. Game Science has already teased their next move, Black Myth, Zhongkui. By shifting focus to the Demon Queller, they are building a cinematic universe of Chinese mythology. The government's stance has also undergone a total 180-degree turn. They no longer see games as electronic heroin to be suppressed. They now see them as a service trade export, a way to project soft power into every living room on Earth. Regional hubs are now offering subsidies to any developer who can follow the Wukong model. They want to integrate traditional history with high-tech hardware. Because Wukong proved a vital point. You don't need to copy the West to win. You just need to scan your own past and build it for the future. The Black Myth is no longer just about a legendary king. It's about the recovery of a nation's creative spirit, and the world's biggest industry will never be the same again.